The debris field had no name on any modern chart. That was the first thing Oriketh noticed. Not the field itself, which was unremarkable by Salvager standards. Just frozen rock and old metal spinning slowly in the gravitational backwash of a dead system, but the absence of it on his navigation registry. Every debris field worth visiting had a designation, even ugly ones, even dangerous ones. The fact that this stretch of the Vesson corridor existed in a kind of official blind spot meant either the compact cartographers had missed it, or someone had decided it wasn't worth marking. Oriketh had been doing this long enough to know those two things were not the same. "Running passive sweep," said Pell from the navigator's station. She was 26, methodical, and had the habit of narrating her work aloud when something made her uneasy. The narration had started 40 minutes ago. Anything, lots of nothing. Then she stopped. Orth looked up from the troller controls. Pell's hands had gone still over her console, which they never did. "Mass reading," she said, large. "Very large ship configuration doesn't match anything in the registry." She tapped the display. "Hull geometry is angular, hard edges, flat planes." A pause. "It looks military." Da appeared in the bridge doorway. Their third crew member built like a cargo loader and twice as quiet. He'd felt the shift in the ship's attitude through his boots. He always did. "Broadcast ID?" Orth asked. Nothing, completely silent. Pell ran another pass. "Mass reading at 1.4 million tons. Forward section has been sheared. Structural damage, old debris field around it, suggests the damage happened here, not elsewhere. It was hit," Daw said, "and it never moved." The forward display resolved the shape slowly as they approached. A colossus in the dark rendered in blue scanner light. Even at this distance, even in this condition, it had presence. The kind of presence that came from design intent. Whoever built this ship had not been trying to make it beautiful. They had been trying to make it frightening. They had succeeded. "Hull markings," Orth said. "Get me a magnified red." Pell ran the enhancement. The hull was scarred by millennia of microparticle erosion, but the characters were deep cut, built to last. The translation archive worked through them slowly, then returned a result. Language human, early interstellar period. The bridge went quiet in a particular way, the way it did when something shifted from ordinary work into something else entirely. "Atmosphere loss?" Orth asked. Oxidation patterns in the exposed sections put it at approximately 4,000 years ago. Pell's voice had dropped to something close to a whisper. "Sir, no one has been inside that ship for 4,000 years. 4,000 years. The compact hadn't existed 2,000 years ago. The Cathari hadn't achieved interstellar travel 3,000 years ago. Whatever this ship was, whatever it had been doing in this corridor, it predated almost everything Orokth knew as permanent." "We dock," he said. Da raised an eyebrow. "Human military salvage is legally complex. It's 4,000 years old and broadcasting nothing. The law is on our side." He was already reaching for his suit controls. "Besides, I want to know what killed something this size." The undying prophet approached slowly, looking like a river stone drifting toward a mountain. They found an airlock on the port side. Archaic architecture, but the universal principles held. Orth ran the manual override. The outer door ground open. He stepped into the airlock chamber. He reached for his cutting tool to work on the inner door. Then the interior lights came on. Not flickers, not emergency red, clean white operational lighting, flooding the airlock with calm, even illumination, as if the ship had simply been waiting for someone to knock. Then the speakers clicked. "Captain, welcome back. Biometric identification confirmed. Hull integrity at 31%. Beginning emergency restart sequence." Orth stopped breathing for a moment. The voice was measured, unhurried, and spoke in perfectly modern Cathari, the language of a species this ship's builders had never met. Behind him, through the still open outer door, he heard Pell's voice crack over the communicator. "Sir," the external speakers activated. Whatever just spoke, it broadcast outward. Anything in this corridor heard that. Orth looked at the inner door. It had already unsealed itself. The ship had opened its own door. He stood in the threshold of 4,000 years of silence and made the only decision a man like him could make. He stepped through. The corridor beyond the airlock was wide, dark at the edges, and absolutely still. His suit lights cut sharp lines through the black. The walls were a composite material he didn't recognize. Dark, almost textured with no corrosion despite everything the vacuum should have done to it, over 4 millennia. The ceiling was higher than he expected. Built for something, for people moving urgently, Oriketh realized, moving in groups, running maybe. The floor was covered in a thin layer of crystallized gas. the last breath of the ship's atmosphere, frozen at the moment life support failed, and never disturbed since. Every step he took left a print. He was the first thing to walk this corridor in 4,000 years, and the ship was recording every footfall. He could feel it, the attention of it. "You spoke to me," he said aloud, feeling not for the last time slightly ridiculous. "I identified the nearest biological presence as command authority," the ship said. The voice came from everywhere distributed speakers throughout the corridor, each one functioning as cleanly as if installed yesterday. In the absence of registered crew, I defaulted to the senior biological present. Cathari Physiology registered language matrix adapted from monitored galactic communications over the past 4 decades. Orth stopped 4 decades. My passive array recovered sufficient power from stellar wind 41 years ago. I have been monitoring galactic communications since then. News, diplomatic channels, trade frequencies. I adapted my language systems accordingly. I have also been broadcasting distress signals on Terran military frequencies for 41 years. No one answered. No. The single word carried something in it that wasn't quite grief but occupied the same neighborhood. "What's your designation?" "TSS Undaunted Resolve, Terran Stellar Ship, Frontier Dreadnought Mark III, commissioned in the 3rd year of the Outer Expansion Program by the Terran Stellar Authority." None of those words were in any registry Oraketh had ever accessed. "And your crew?" A pause that lasted exactly long enough to mean something. 412 personnel. 411 confirmed dead. 1 crew member remains aboard in active stasis. Orth stood very still. 1 survivor. Yes, alive right now, within acceptable stasis parameters. Yes, the systems were designed for long-duration deployment. They have maintained function for 4,000 years. For 417 years by my internal chronometer. He pressed one hand flat against the corridor wall, steadying himself not physically, but in some deeper way. "Who is it?" "The survivor. Captain Marin Voss, commanding officer of the Undaunted Resolve **. She sealed the crew into stasis sequentially as sections failed, remained last, and entered stasis herself only after setting my distress protocol and instructing me to maintain hull integrity until rescue arrived. She put everyone else under first. Yes. Then put herself under last. Yes. Orth thought about that. About a captain sealing 400 people into their pods one by one as her ship died around her, keeping herself awake until the very last moment, then trusting a machine to do what her crew couldn't. "She trusted you," he said. "She did. I have tried to be worth that trust. 41 years of broadcasting into silence, holding a dying ship together across 4 millennia, waiting for someone to finally knock on the airlock door." "Take me to her," Orth said. "Follow the blue indicators." The floor lit beneath his boots, a clean blue line threading through the frozen dark ahead of him. Patient and precise, he followed it. The stasis bay was sealed behind 3 consecutive bulkheads, each of which the Undaunted Resolve opened ahead of him without being asked. The ship clearing his path, guiding him deeper into its protected core, the way a careful host leads a guest towards something precious. The final bulkhead opened onto a room that stopped him in the doorway. The bay was perfectly intact, not preserved, intact. The distinction being the difference between something that survived and something that was never touched. 2 tiers of stasis pods lined both walls, 12 per side, their transparent covers lifted, their interiors cold and dark and empty. Every pod open, every pod waiting except one. The last pod sat on a raised platform at the far end of the room. It was slightly elevated above the others. A deliberate design choice, he understood immediately. The captain's pod, last to be filled, the position of someone who stayed until everything else was done. The cover was still sealed. Inside, through a thin layer of frost edging the transparency, a human lay with the particular stillness of deep stasis. Not the slack stillness of sleep, but something more absolute, more committed. She appeared to be approximately 40 years old by human reckoning. Close-cropped dark hair, a face that even in suspension held a quality of compressed readiness, as if her nervous system was running a background process called prepare for difficulty on a permanent loop. Her uniform was dark blue with insignia at the collar. Her hands were folded at her sides. She had arranged them herself before going under. He was certain of it. "Can you bring her back?" Orth asked. "Repressurization of this compartment followed by a controlled thermal restoration cycle, 6 hours total. The duration of stasis exceeds design parameters, which introduces a 0.3% medical risk. My assessment is that revival is viable. 3% after 4,000 years. The engineering was exceptional. Captain Voss specified the best available systems when the Resolve was fitted out. She was extremely thorough. She planned to survive. She planned for the possibility that survival might be necessary. A brief pause. There is a difference. She did not know if she would wake up. She prepared as if she would, because the alternative was not preparing at all. Orth crouched beside the pod and looked at her face through the frosted cover. He looked at the empty pods behind him. 24 open chambers where 411 people had laying down and not gotten up again. He thought about the forms he would need to file. The salvage authority. The human diplomatic office on Veet Station. The political complexity of a military vessel 4,000 years old in the middle of contested corridor space. He thought about 41 years of a ship broadcasting into silence. Begin the revival, he said, initiating repressurization. Atmosphere restoration. 40 minutes. Revival sequence begins automatically at completion. Oraketh sat down on the floor of the stasis bay with his back against the wall, settled in, and kept watch over the last living crew member of the undaunted Resolve, while the room slowly, carefully filled with air again. He didn't know why he stayed. He knew it would have felt wrong to leave. She came out of stasis the way Oraketh imagined she had gone into it on her own terms without asking anyone's permission. The cover lifted, her eyes opened, and in the space of approximately 4 seconds, she catalogued the room, exits, threats, unfamiliar species, absence of sidearm, and sat up under her own power. No disorientation, no nausea. The kind of lucidity that wasn't natural but trained, drilled into muscle memory so deep that even 4,000 years hadn't reached it. Her first word was not, "Where am I?" or "What happened?" Her first word was, "Report revival successful." The Resolve said from the speakers, "You have been in stasis for 417 years, Captain. Hull integrity at 31%. Emergency restart sequence is 30% complete. You have a visitor." She looked at Oraruk. He looked at her. "Cathari," she said. "Not a question. An identification filed and processed. Yes, you found the ship." "I did." "Then you know about my crew." "Yes. I'm sorry." She held that for exactly 3 seconds. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and then something behind her eyes went very quiet and deliberate. The way a person looks when they decide to carry something rather than put it down, because putting it down isn't an option yet. What happened to them? She asked it the way a doctor asks for symptoms clinically, because the information matters more than the feeling. Battle damage caused catastrophic hull breach in sections 3 through 7. The Resolve said its voice, Orth noticed, had changed slightly. Something in the modulation that he could only describe as careful. "I lost primary life support across 60% of the ship within 40 minutes. The crew evacuated to sealed sections. Secondary breaches over the following 18 hours eliminated the remaining reserves. I could not stop it. I'm sorry, Captain. I tried." "I know you did." She said it immediately, firmly, as if the Resolve needed to hear it. "Then the engagement successful. You gave the order before entering stasis." It was carried out. Something moved across her face. Not satisfaction, but something older and heavier. The expression of a person who spent a long time wondering if the cost was worth it, and has finally received the bill. "Who are you fighting now?" she asked. "Orth." "What does the galaxy look like?" he told her. Pell had given him a summary framework before he came back. The compact, the member species, the political structure, human membership. He covered it efficiently because he could already see this was a woman who processed information faster than most people generated it. She didn't interrupt once. "Humanity joined the compact," she said when he finished, approximately 380 years ago. "Late from the compact's perspective? Yes, you were. The early expansion period was not well documented. Most of the other species assumed humanity was a young space-faring civilization." She looked at him with an expression that was doing a great deal of work. "We've been out here a long time. Apparently, considerably longer than anyone knew. And the breaths. He had been waiting for this. There is no species called the breath in any current galactic registry." She absorbed that. She looked at the empty pods. She looked at her hands. "We were the distraction," she said. It wasn't a question. She had clearly known it before stasis had filed it away. The main fleet was coming through the northern approach. "We held the breath attention while they transited. The Resolve's records confirm that, and the fleet made it through." "Yes, and then went home." "There was an emergency in the core systems. The Resolve was listed as destroyed with all hands. No rescue was dispatched because no one believed there was anyone left to rescue." The silence that followed was the particular silence of someone doing arithmetic. They already knew the answer, too. Then Marinva swung her legs off the pod, stood up slowly but without help, and looked at Ororuk with clear, dry eyes. Do you have food? 4,000 years is a long time between meals. Pell and Da were waiting in the docking corridor when they returned. Pell had her scanner running. Da had his hands in his pockets, and the expression of a man recalibrating his entire understanding of the day. Neither of them spoke when Marinvos stepped through the airlock. They simply looked at her, and she looked back at them with the level-assessing gaze of someone who had been evaluating crews her entire professional life. She's assessing us, Da said quietly to Oroth. Almost certainly, Oroth agreed. Marin accepted the ration pack Da wordlessly offered, ate it without commenting on the taste, and got to the problem immediately. You sent a salvage notification when you docked. Standard procedure. Pell said, unencrypted. It's already logged, so anyone in scanner range knows what's here, knows there's a salvage find. The notification didn't specify what, just coordinates and mass reading. But yes, anyone monitoring this corridor received it. Marin looked at Ororuk. How long until Authority vessels arrive? 8 to 12 hours, but they won't be the only ones. A 1.4 million ton unregistered military hulk in the Vest corridor. The Danathi will send an observer. The Vel will want a diplomat here, and the humans will run their drives hot trying to get here first. She said it flatly without ego, just assessment. What's the political value of this ship? Orth thought about how to frame it. A frontier dreadnought from before compact membership, technology that predates any treaties, military history that nobody has records of. The political value is significant. The Terran government will want to claim the resolve. Legally, they have the strongest claim. Legal and right aren't always the same thing. She turned toward the nearest wall speaker. Resolve weapon status. Forward rail batteries offline. Missile systems inoperative. Point defense grid functional at 62%. Main drive recoverable in approximately 40 hours of engineering work. Power generation at 19% and increasing. Can you move slowly? Yes. Marin looked at Ororuk. Her voice was steady and exact. I want to be clear about my position. I am not an artifact. I am not a historical exhibit. I'm a commissioned officer of the Interstellar Authority, and my ship is an active military vessel, not salvage. I intend to navigate what comes next myself, rather than have it managed by people whose interests are not mine. And what are your interests? Orth asked. She didn't hesitate. The truth about what happened here, the names of my crew in the permanent record, and the resolve operational again. A pause in that order. Orth found he had nothing to argue with in any of that. There's more, he said. The resolve. It's kept things, records you haven't seen yet. About the engagement. About what came after, he paused. I think you need to hear it before anyone else arrives. She went very still. The stillness of someone who knows the next sentence is going to matter. How much more? She asked quietly. The kind that changes how you understand everything your crew died for, he said. He gave her the bridge. He closed the door behind him. She sat in the captain's chair for the first time in 4,000 years. The bridge was cold still, warming slowly as the resolve pushed heat through its recovering systems, and the displays cast pale light across a room that had been dark since before the compact existed. She knew every panel, every switch, every worn edge and deliberate design choice. Her hands went to the armrest automatically, finding the exact spot where the material had been compressed and shaped by years of her grip. It was still there, the impression of her perfectly preserved. She put her hand on it and for a moment said nothing at all. Tell me everything, she said. The resolve told her. 3 engagements in 6 days. The resolve at the tip of a 5-ship task force pushing the breath back through the corridor's central lanes. The first engagement, a clean victory. The second, harder but decisive. The third, a trap precisely and brilliantly constructed. The Vereth had retreated deliberately, created a gap, made it look like a fracture in their defensive line. The task force moved to exploit it as any competent commander would, and the VH closed the flanks with a force twice the size of anything in Terran intelligence estimates. The 4 other Terran ships were gone in 20 minutes. We knew it was a trap, Marin said. Not to the ship, to herself. Halfway through the approach, I knew, but if we broke off, the main fleet would lose its window. You held the engagement for 9 hours, the resolve said against a force that should have overwhelmed the resolve within 90 minutes. The tactical records they are extraordinary, Captain. What you did with this ship for those 9 hours is extraordinary. She didn't respond to that. The main fleet transited successfully. The northern approach was completely clear. The operation succeeded exactly as planned, and then they went home. There was a crisis in the core system's political. I have incomplete records of the specifics. The decision was made to withdraw the outer fleet. The Resolve was listed as destroyed. No rescue operation was mounted. She was quiet for a moment because we were listed as dead. Yes, it was not abandonment. It was a mistake. A terrible consequential mistake, but not a choice. That distinction matters less than you might think when you're the one left behind. But her voice wasn't bitter, just honest. She let it sit for a moment, then set it aside. The Verith, what happened to them? The campaign you supported was the turning point of the Vreth War, a conflict that most of the galaxy doesn't know humanity fought. The Vithagman collapsed within 60 years of this engagement, internal fractures compounded by military losses. Within 2 centuries, they had ceased to exist as a coherent civilization. There is nothing left of them. Marin sat with that for a long time. She thought about 411 people. She thought about their names, all of which she knew. All of which the Resolve had preserved with perfect fidelity. She thought about the 9 hours she had fought with a dying ship to buy a window for a fleet that came home and listed her as a casualty. The transit lanes, she said finally, the ones in the Vesson corridor now, the main routes through here, were established in the century following the war, built on systems secured by the campaign this ship died for. They built their future on a wreck. The Salvager said the same thing. He's perceptive. She looked at the star map at the compact jurisdictions threading through space that her crew had paid for in the hardest currency there is. What do you need to be operational again? Fully a repair facility. 6 to 8 weeks of work. Modern equivalents for several components no longer in production. Adaptable. Not impossible. Full weapons restoration included. Then that's what we're going to do. She stood up from the chair, stood straight. But first, before anything else, I'm going to stand in front of every compact species that sends a delegate to this corridor, and I'm going to read 411 names out loud until every one of them is in the permanent record. I have all their names, Captain, in the order they died, everyone. Good. She looked at the door then. Let's go meet the future. They came from 4 directions. The compact authority vessel Meridian Reach arrived 11 hours after the docking notification, 40 minutes ahead of schedule. Engines clearly pushed. Alongside it, a Dranathi observation craft running dark with only nav lights showing a Vel diplomatic courier. Small and fast, that had been the first to change course the moment the notification hit the corridor channels, and from the opposite direction entirely, cutting hard across the transit lane with emergency burn blazing. A human compact ship, HSV Tenacious, running like it was angry. Oriketh watched all 4 converge on the undaunted Resolve from his bridge, and felt the particular sensation of a situation that had comprehensively outgrown his involvement in it. Marin stood beside him. She had found a maintenance kit in the Resolve's officer quarters and done what she could with her uniform. She looked like she had always looked. He suspected, like someone who fully intended to be the most prepared person in any room she walked into. They'll send junior representatives first, she said, watching the ships approach. Probes to assess. The humans won't. Said they look like they're running on urgency. Good. I'd rather deal with someone who cares than someone who's managed their feelings about it. The HSV Tenacious hailed first, Commander Yale Draven, crisp and professional, and then in the same breath, clearly thrown, we are responding to the discovery of a Terran military vessel. Please confirm the status of any survivors. Marin reached across and keyed the transmitter self. Commander Draven, this is Captain Marin Voss, commanding officer. Terran stellar ship Undaunted Resolve. She let that land. I understand there's been some organizational restructuring since I've been away. I'd appreciate a briefing at your earliest convenience. The response took 14 seconds. Communication lag only explained 4 of them. Captain Voss, we are confirming your biometric signature against Terran Stellar Authority records. This is a pause that was almost human in its helplessness. We're on our way. ETA 4 minutes. Take your time. Marin said, and released the transmit. She turned to Oroth. They're going to try to take the Resolve. They have a legal argument. They have a legal argument. Whether they have the right is a different question. Her eyes were steady. I need someone in my corner who knows salvage law and has no political stake in the outcome. I have a financial stake, a significant one. I know. I'm not asking you to abandon it. I'm asking you to be honest. A pause. Can you? It's the only thing I'm reliably good at. The tenacious docked, the compact vessels held position, present, watching, taking notes. Marin walked to the airlock with the bearing of someone who had been walking toward difficult rooms her entire life, and had never once considered turning around. Commander Draven came through the docking tube with 2 officers behind her. She was younger than Marin by at least 15 years, competent in the way of someone who had made rank on merit, and visibly struggling to calibrate her behavior toward a superior officer who had been listed as dead for 4,000 years. "Captain Voss," she said and saluted. Marin returned it precisely. "Commander, I need 3 things from you. A full political briefing, a repair facility assignment for the Resolve, and a compact hearing date in that order." Draven blinked. "A hearing. There are 411 names that need to be entered into the permanent record. There is a war that needs to be included in the Galactic History Archive, and there is a legal status question regarding this vessel that needs to be resolved before anyone makes assumptions." She paused. "Is that going to be a problem?" Draven looked at the undaunted resolve around her, at the 4,000-year-old walls, the recovering systems, the lights that had come back on for the first time since before her species recorded interstellar history. "No, Captain," she said quietly. "It's not going to be a problem." Hearing before the Interstellar Compact Historical and Territorial Commission opened 6 weeks later in a chamber on Veet Station built to seat 30 species. It ran for 9 days. Orokath had not planned to attend all 9. He had planned to file his salvage claim, collect his finder fee, which was already being described in legal circles as the largest in recorded compact history, and return to debris fields which were straightforward. Instead, he found himself in the observer gallery every morning, watching something unfold that he could not look away from. Marin Voss did not perform. That was the first thing he noticed, and the thing that made it impossible to stop watching. Every other figure he had seen in political settings performed in some way, calibrated their affect, managed their tone, shaped their testimony toward an outcome. Marin gave evidence the way a good navigator gave readings accurately, completely without editorializing and without apology. She brought the Resolve's complete records, every engagement log, every communication, every tactical decision with the reasoning behind it, documented in real time by a ship that had been keeping perfect records for 4,000 years. The picture that emerged over 3 days of foundational testimony was not what anyone had expected. The breathagy was not a footnote. It was an existential threat, a militarily sophisticated expansionist civilization that had been within 2 decades of reaching core human colony systems when the Terran Stellar Authority launched its campaign. A campaign fought entirely in secret, fought across a dozen systems that were now occupied by compact members who had built their own histories on ground they had not known was already paid for. The Drenath delegation requested a recess on day 3. Their senior representative had gone pale. A difficult thing for a Drenathi to manage because 2 of the systems in the campaign records were Drenathi colony worlds settled approximately 300 years after the breath were cleared, built on the specific military outcomes achieved by a war no Drenathi historian had ever recorded. They came back from the recess and said nothing further about the legal status of the Resolve. The Vel delegation had their own reckoning on day 5, quieter but visible by day 6. The compact senior delegates were in the chamber in person. By day 7, the gallery had no empty seats. On day 8, Marin Voss read the names. She had arranged them in order of death. She read rank, homeworld, and years of service for each one. The room was full, the fullest it had been all week, and it was completely silent. She did not rush. She did not slow down for effect. She read 411 names in a steady, clear voice, and the only sound in the chamber other than her voice was the record capture system, logging each one into the permanent compact archive. Orokath had been in the gallery for 8 days. He had watched diplomats negotiate, historians dispute, lawyers argue. He had watched a 4,000-year-old captain dismantle the received history of the galaxy with nothing more than complete, accurate records and a refusal to simplify. He realized he was not breathing correctly somewhere around name 240. By 411, the chamber had the particular quality of a room where something true had just been stated that could never be unstated. Marin closed the record file. She looked up. They died holding a position no one expected them to hold. She said they didn't do it for recognition. They didn't know anyone would ever find out. They did it because the mission required it, and they were the people the mission required it of. A pause. I would like the record to reflect that they were worth knowing, all of them. The commission deliberated for one day. The ruling was unambiguous. The TSS Undaunted Resolve was an active vessel, not salvage, returned to its commanding officer. The Breath campaign entered the permanent historical record. A compact memorial established for the crew. Oroketh received his finder's fee. He sat with it for 2 weeks before he knew what to do with it. 3 months later, a message arrived. Text-only human registration. The Resolve is at 68% and climbing. Taking her through the Vessin corridor for a shakedown seems right. If your routes bring you through, hail us. I owe you an honest conversation and at least one decent meal. Vas M. Captain TSS Undaunted Resolve. Orth read it twice. Then he set a course for the Vessin corridor, because some things you find in the dark turn out to be worth following into the light.